Alright guys, welcome back to the garage. Now Tuesday evening about 9 p.m. and we're just out in the garage for a power hour after dinner. And I think I mentioned yesterday that I was expecting my aluminum radiator to be delivered today, and it was, so I've picked that up. And here's where we've got, this is an eBay purchase, and you can see all the details probably here on the box. Made in Cambodia, so I know it's going to be interesting to see what kind of quality this is. But it definitely is not an expensive radiator, that is for sure, compared to something like I have in my TR6, which is a Wizard aluminum radiator. That was fairly expensive. This was less than half the price of the Wizard. So anyway, I'm hoping this will do the job for the 250. I don't think it can be any worse than the original 55-year-old radiator that's in there, as I showed you yesterday on the video. So we're going to unpack this at least tonight. We're not going to put it in, but we're going to unpack it and get it ready for tomorrow's session after work. I did also receive my package from Good Parts over here that I'll also unpackage. And this is the new stainless steel radiator shroud in this box and my choke cables. So I've got a couple other things to unpack over here, but we're going to unpack the aluminum rad, have a quick look at it, maybe give it a quick measurement check just to make sure it fits. It's supposed to be a direct drop-in for the stock radiator, but you know how that goes sometimes. So I'm going to do a little bit of measurements. I particularly want to measure the width of the radiator to make sure that my electric fan that I have installed on the outside, so as a pusher fan, I want to make sure that it actually will install on this aluminum radiator. I actually have the kit to do that installation, but we got to make sure obviously that the width of the radiators are the same. Otherwise this fan is not going to work, because that fan was perfectly sized for this radiator and couldn't go any smaller than the width that's on there currently. So we'll see if that's going to work. I hope it does. Otherwise, we're going to have to figure out what to do next. Anyway, let's get that box unpacked. All right, right off the bat, I'm impressed with the packaging, so that's a good thing. So the exterior box and leads to an interior box, which is nicely wrapped and packaged. So that's looking good so far. So I thought I'd just sort of share that with you before we go too much further. So let's continue the unpackaging. So there is the GPI Racing. GPIAutoparts.com is where I got this from. So let's continue on. Alright, first impressions. It actually looks pretty darn good. Again, like I mentioned, the packaging was really well done. So I'm just taking a look at it overall, taking a look at the welding and the actual finish of it. And it actually looks pretty darn good. So I'm only going to get a bit of an overview here, but anyway, that looks pretty darn good to me for the, as I mentioned, the price that I paid for it. So what we're going to do now is just we're going to take some quick measurements, and we'll see from a width perspective and a height perspective if we're close to the stock original. It should be. These are supposed to be in the stock mount locations, so we'll check those as well. It does have the right ports, which is promising. It does come with a cap as well. So anyway, let's see how we do as far as measurements are concerned. Alright, I did some quick measurements on the width of the radiator, and it looks like my fan is going to work, so that's a positive. I haven't bothered to measure or try and measure things like the fitment points for it. Sits actually down on the chassis here in the car, and it's pretty hard to measure the rad that's in there right now. So I think what we'll just end up doing is taking the old radiator out, putting this in, hoping that it fits. And we'll try to do that as mentioned tomorrow. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to unbox our radiator shroud from Good Parts and rescue our choke cable from there as well. So those will be some more components that we install tomorrow as well in conjunction with the radiator. Just unpack the radiator shroud and the choke cables. Choke cables look great. So here is the shroud components. So it comes in 3 pieces. And then there's the fitting kit here, and there's instructions as well to go with it. So I've just opened the bag to grab the instructions so I can read those tonight. Yes, I do read the instructions occasionally. So anyway, we'll put this together tomorrow. Of course, this has just got a wrap on it to protect the stainless steel. We'll peel that off tomorrow once we get ready to install this. So looking forward to seeing this all together. It's going to make a big difference to the engine bay. It's going to definitely add some bling to it. So say goodbye to the old stock radiator, and hopefully the new radiator will fit and will look good, and we'll get that shroud on there and take up that big empty space in front of the radiator and get rid of these clunky cardboard radiator shrouds that are stock for the 250. Alright, that's it for now, guys. We'll see you out here tomorrow after work. Alright, it's the next day, Wednesday, and radiator installation day today. So beautiful day to be out in the garage today. Perfect temperature for working out here. Anyway, we've got the radiator just out here on the table, ready to be installed. Hopefully that goes easily. And we've just pushed the car back a little bit, and we're just about to put it up on jack stands. So I can get to that bottom radiator hose a little bit easier. We're going to start by draining the radiator. I don't know how many times I've drained the radiator on this car. It seems like a lot of times. But anyway, we'll do it one more time and get that old radiator out of there and start the installation of the new radiator. And then we'll work on installing the shroud. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in my last night's video, but it looks like I may have a little bit of an issue with the electric fan on the inside of the radiator interfering with the drop down of the stainless steel top piece for the radiator shroud. So we may have to overcome that somehow, whether I have to notch the top of the shroud or maybe trim the top of the electric fan a little bit. We'll see once I get it out of the car. But right now, like I said, it looks like it's sitting up on a bit of an angle like this at the rear. So it needs to sit sort of flattish, so it's sitting kind of like that. Anyway, we'll overcome that when we get to it. But right now, let's concentrate on getting the radiator drained, and then we'll get the support bars unbolted, and the two nuts on either side, or two bolts on either side that secure it down to the frame, to the chassis. We'll get those loosened up, and we'll just hopefully be able to lift that right out. Alright, not necessarily a hard job, but a bit of a messy job. It can be a lot harder to get your bottom radiator hose off if your hose is welded on there. Mine's obviously fairly new, so it wasn't too difficult to get off. The only problem is these original radiators don't have a petcock, so you can't drain the coolant out before you pop that bottom hose off. So it's like Niagara Falls when you do, so you better have a bucket ready, and you better be ready to get out of the way. So anyway, everything is detached, including the electric fan connections at the front, the support bars, strut bars on the side, obviously both top and bottom hoses, and the two bottom bolts that secure the radiator to the chassis are out. There should be a couple of rubber washers underneath those brackets that hold the radiator down to the chassis. Hopefully they're there. If they're not, we're going to replace them. I'm pretty sure I put them there when I put the old radiator in, so hopefully they're still there. Anyway, we're about ready to do a lift off. I'm not going to film it. I'm probably going to get a little wet doing it. There's always a little bit of residual coolant left in the rad no matter what you do. Although I do have the car sort of tilted back, we have retained some coolant in the block at least, and the rest is in the bucket below, and well, let's say 3/4 of it is in the bucket below, 1/4 of it's on the garage floor. At least it's not on me. Alright, let's lift this out, and we'll do some measurements and some comparisons, and then we'll drop the new one in its place. Alright, the old radiator is out, and as you can see, we've got the big SPAL fan mounted on the back side of the rad, or actually the front side if you want to consider it that. Anyway, it's installed as a pusher fan because I still are running the mechanical fan. I can't put this on as a puller fan, if that makes sense. Anyway, we're just about to take the fan off. We just have these little through kits with the tie wires on, little foam pads on the inside, so we'll just get some cutters out and we'll cut those off. That's probably going to be a little bit difficult actually, but we'll do our best to get that off, and then we'll proceed with installing it, or trying to install it, on the new radiator after we do some modifications. Now here's what I was talking about. These little tabs here, this little foot here is actually, I think, interfering, or going to interfere with the radiator shield or shroud that we want to put on. So I think we're going to trim this off, and probably trim the bottom one off as well a little bit, and we're going to try to move the radiator fan down as much to the bottom of the rad as we can, so we can gain a little bit of room at the top. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, we'll get to detaching this fan first, and then we'll consider what modifications we can do in order to make this fit. Alright, we just took some quick measurements and things are looking pretty good. The fan does fit on the inside of the radiator frame, which is good. The only concern I do have is the width of the mountings. It looks like it may be 1/4 of an inch off on the bottom, but we'll see once we're going to do a dry fit before anything. Before I actually even install the electric fan, we'll just drop it in and see if it lines up. There is some room to slot these if need be, but I think we're going to be very close. So I think I'm at the point now where I'm going to do a test dry fit, and I'm also going to go ahead. I'm actually going to chop this little nub off the top of the fan. That might help me a little bit when it comes to fitting the radiator shroud. So we'll make that modification. There's not much I can do on the bottom that's going to change anything, so we'll just have to live with that. But we can do the modifications on the top at least and make it as best we can before we fit it. Alright, there is the dry fit, and everything seems to be lining up okay. You can sort of see the holes down there. I think, I'm not sure if you can see that they're aligned. Actually, I can push this a little further to the left if need be. I believe I have clearance on the bottom of the radiator hose, so it's not touching the frame. That's always somewhat of an issue. I can always lower the rubber. I do have a rubber washer underneath the side over here that I could actually thin out if need be, if I needed to drop that down a little bit, because that's holding the radiator up probably at least 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch off of the frame. So anyway, it's looking good. I think it's going to look better than the old rad once it's fully installed, but let's continue on with the process. Alright, the electric fan is now installed. You can see how they just come through on the other side there with the little foam blocks and the little zip tie keepers, I'm going to call them, the round keepers. It's a nice clean install. We did decide to go and install the bottom radiator hose at least to the radiator, and then we'll do the hard pipe afterwards. It should be a little bit easier doing it this way, I would think. So we'll leave the plastic on the top inlet for now, but let's get it in the car. Alright, just a quick report. So far the fit has been excellent. Everything is lined up as it should. The radiator support bars are on there loosely now. Even the hardware worked on the studs on the radiator. Normally when you get stuff from overseas, sometimes the fasteners are metric or different from what the stock car was. But in this case, those fasteners work just fine, so I'm happy about that. So we're going to get under the car now, and we're going to connect the bottom radiator hose. We're going to connect the electric fan back up before we tighten anything up, just to make sure we have good clearance, for example, on the bottom radiator hose. And then we'll move on to the next step, which will be to fill the radiator and add the radiator shield. Things are going well so far, knock on wood. Hopefully the radiator holds water. Alright, the radiator installation project is complete. All of the hoses are tight, all of the fittings are tight. We've got the electric fan hooked back up, so we're ready to move on to the next step. I'm just trying to figure out what step that should be. Should I fill the radiator with coolant now and make sure it's not leaking, or should I go ahead and fit the fan shroud or the radiator shroud? I think we're going to take a chance. I think we're going to fit the radiator shroud before we go ahead and fill it with coolant. And I'm pretty sure we're going to be okay, but you never know. So who knows? Things might need to be undone, but if they do, we'll do it. We've gone one step backwards. We loosened everything back up and took the strut bars back off. I need a little bit of wiggle room to actually get the radiator shield or shroud on the top here past this little nipple for the overflow bottle. That was preventing it from dropping down. No matter how I tried to Jenga it in there, it wasn't fitting. So we took everything apart again, loosened it up, and now we've got enough space to get that top shield piece in there. So we'll go ahead and move on, and then we'll tighten it up at the very end. Alright guys, as you can probably see, I did modify my shroud slightly so it'll sit down a little bit flatter over my electric fan. So that's what we had to do. It can't be seen actually when the full install is done, so I'm pretty sure it can't be seen anyway. Anyway, we're going to do this little backing material here. It's just a piece of plastic or nylon that fits against the, trims the edges of the radiator shield on the sides and on the back. And this is where it presses up against the radiator. So we're going to apply this now, and we'll move on to the next step. Alright guys, there is the install, and I think it's looking pretty darn good. A little bit of cleanup to do there. Missed a little bit of coolant there on the radiator shroud, but it's looking good. The shroud fit pretty well. It actually fits a little bit tighter on the right hand side versus the left hand side, and that probably has to do with the front valence replacement. So it does have a little bit of a gap here on this side, but nothing to worry about. Much better than the old cardboard deflector shields. So we're going to crank it up and heat it up and see if we have any leaks at all, and I'll report back. I had the car running for about 10 minutes or so, and it looks pretty dry under there, so all's good. I've just got the electric fan on, seeing how that works with the shroud. And we're still right in the middle where we should be, so we're looking good. Oil pressure's good. That's full hot oil pressure. And almost out of gas again, but idling pretty good. Alright, we'll let her idle for a little bit longer, and I've got a good RPM actually on the idle. I think we're just about 1,000, maybe around 900, somewhere around there. Let's check that out. Yeah, just around 1,000. Probably drop it down a tiny bit. Yeah, sounding pretty good there. I put the hood down as well just to see how we do as far as the heat sink is concerned with the hood down, and we seem to be okay. So yeah, I think all is good in the hood. It looks like we're going to get some more rain, possibly, and before that happens we're going to store this old radiator away. So one last look at the stock 55-plus-year-old radiator. And like I said, it's still functional, and if for some reason we have a problem with the aluminum rad that's in the car now and it starts to leak, we have a backup plan. So we'll put this away in storage, and hopefully don't have to pull it out again. But that's it for now. Let's pack it up before the rain starts. Alright, on to installing the choke cable, and this is the cable from Good Parts. I've just exchanged out the choke knob that says choke. I believe that's for later cars, like my 73 has the actual word choke on the knob, whereas the earlier cars have this funny looking choke symbol. So we've just put the new knob on the cable that we're going to use. Actually, that was stupid. I should have turned this off first. So we'll undo that. If you don't know how to get these knobs off, there's a little button you need to depress with an awl or a pin. You can probably see it there, and these will come off. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that, and then we'll start trying to snake this through this little grommet on the firewall, which is going to be a little difficult, a little challenging. Might have to fish a wire through there, and we'll do our best to make this as painless as possible. Alright, one last update for the night. You might be able to tell that the choke cables have now been installed, and they are operating as they should. The choke knob's on a bit of an angle. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fix that or not, but we'll live with it for now. So basically, yeah, I'm quite happy with the aluminum rad install. It went fine. It fit perfectly as it should. Stainless steel shroud looks good. I'm happy how that's cleaned up the front area of the car. I still need to go and do some detailing. I see quite a bit of polishing compound here and there, particularly down in the areas down low. I've cleaned some of the polishing compound off the inside of the bonnet, but I haven't got everything yet. Around the headlight buckets I can see some compound as well. But that'll be the final detail of the car. I'm not going to get too worried about it at the moment. Anyway, it's looking pretty good in my mind. There's only really one more thing I want to do in this engine bay, and I'm not going to tell you what that is right now. I'm going to go and see somebody on Friday to see if they can help me out with a little project, and I'll take you along if we do end up doing said project. One thing I did want to point out, I did not try my Mr. Gasket thermocap on this new radiator. It was fouling on the bottom of the bonnet anyway. There's a couple of dimples there that were created by these little dimples on top of the cap, so it's actually scratched at my paint a little bit, so we'll have to touch up that area. So I don't think we'll go back with this thermocap. It is nice to have a backup, but I know our temperature gauge works perfectly, so I think we're good to go. Maybe we'll just throw this in the glove box and we'll install it if we think we've got some sort of issue with our temperature gauge. So I think that's it for tonight, guys. Thanks for watching, thanks for commenting, and thanks for subscribing, as always. So we'll see you back out here tomorrow, and maybe we'll try to play with the hardtop fitting again and get this installed for the final time and make it easily removed and easily installed by one person if need be. So that's tomorrow's project. We'll get there when we get there. All right, have a good night.